Paul Nuttall, why do you want to leave the EU?
Well, because I think it's a bureaucratic mess. I think it's expensive. It doesn't allow us to control our own borders. There is a significant democratic deficit. And quite frankly, I want Britain to be an independent nation that looks to the globe, not just looks to Europe, which is in fact the slowest growing economic bloc on the planet.
What would you say to that, Dennis Macshane?
Oh, it's our biggest trading partner. I mean, I'm very keen in a European referendum to stay in or out of the Eurovision Song Contest. I mean, I think I'd be happy to organise one on that. I'd vote to, I think, withdraw.
All right. What's the answer to his point?
Very simply, we're in lots of international organisations. If we have a referendum, I think we'll vote to stay in, but it won't solve anything because we're bitterly divided on Europe, like in the 19th century we were divided on free trade or the Irish question. I mean, it's a fault line in British life and politics. And if I thought a referendum would solve anything, both parties can offer it. It won't make any difference.
Well, let's put the referendum aside. What's the substance? He says we'd be better off out of it. We'd concentrate on trading with the world, the emerging markets, rather than the sclerotic markets of Europe.
Terrific idea, but Belgium exports more than we do to India. The Eurozone as a whole has a balance of trade surplus. I mean, they look at us and see a country now without any growth, double-dip recession, huge balance of trades and debt problems, and they'd like Britain to be more like some of the Eurozone countries that are performing very well.
Wouldn't we end up in a sort of splendid isolation if we were to leave the EU?
No, I don't think we would. I think what we would end... Don't forget, we're the seventh largest economy in the world. What I want us to do is to look towards India. I want us to look towards Australia, Canada, the big emerging nations, the countries with fast-growing economies. That's where our future lies, not within the European Union, which, as I said earlier, is a bureaucratic mess, overseeing a currency which is falling around our ears at the moment.
But Paul, look, let's be very clear. We do about 1.4% of our trade with India. We export more to Ireland.
Yeah, he's saying we should do more. He's saying we should do more.
I'm
obsessed with Europe. We should do more with India and Brazil.
William Hague has spent the last 2 years banging the drum for UK trade anywhere except in Europe. And actually our trade with the outside world is going down, not up. I'm not against it. But, I mean, Joe Johnson, he's a Conservative MP, wrote a very good pamphlet just a few days ago. And he said, Britain is far behind the rest of Europe in terms of export trade promotion. So the idea that quitting Europe somehow opens us up to marvellous trade opportunities just isn't realistic.
But wouldn't it help if we had our seat on the World Trade Organization, for example, which at the moment is an EU seat? Look, we have connections to these countries. We have economic, we have business, we have linguistic connections. What we're doing is we're missing a fantastic opportunity by tying ourselves to the slowest growing economic bloc.
But wouldn't we end up simply being like Norway, which has been called the fax democracy? You're not part of the decision-making process, but basically you have to implement most of what the EU says.
Well, not necessarily so. We want to trade with our European partners. We want to be friends. And look, a free trade deal would be on the table. Why? Because no doubt Dennis will tell you that 3 million jobs in this country are dependent on our membership of the EU. Well, look, the reason why the trade deal would be on the table is because 12 million jobs on the continent are dependent on trade with the UK.
Well,
so we can have the best of both worlds here.
I think that's a silly argument that somehow it's all upside downside on trade. But take Norway. Norway implements more EU directives than we do. Take Switzerland, often quoted. Switzerland is in Schengen. And I love it when Nigel Farage and Paul talk about trading with India and Pakistan and the rest of it. But they're all for keeping these people out of the UK. And you can't be so unpleasant about foreigners in Britain and immigrants in Britain and then say, oh, but we'd love to increase trade with these other countries. You can't be open for business and closed to foreigners, which is the UKIP policy.
No, well, the UKIP policy is quite simply we can't have open-door immigration. And at the time of recession, which we have at the moment, with 22% youth unemployment...
Let's stick to the European Union. Isn't it de facto he might get his way? If the Eurozone becomes a fiscal union, which if the Germans are to agree to Eurobonds, it will have to become. It'll become much more tightly integrated. We're not going to be part of that. We will effectively be outside.
We might be more marginalised. I mean, I do accept that. And I do worry because you could have an in-out referendum, fine. We can leave the European Union and what? What will change?
Well, what would we lose?
What we would lose is exactly that position that we maintained for a good number of years of being in there fighting as hard as we can to maintain some open liberal policies. For example, when we had the mad cow disease, afterwards when our beef was absolutely safe, only the EU would accept it. Australia wouldn't, Canada
Well, the
wouldn't.
French didn't for quite a while.
No, but they had to. Hong Kong, our colony, said, British beef, you must be joking. So
we're staying in Europe for mad cow disease?
No, we're staying. No, don't be flippant about our agricultural industry, Andrew. It's very, very important for our farmers that they can export. If we're outside the EU, I think British agricultural exports would come to a juddering halt. For a small example.
Shouldn't we renegotiate and put that to the people rather than you're in, out? People would like to know the term. There may be different terms in which we could stay in.
Well, look, we tried to renegotiate for many, many years now. I've come to the conclusion that, unfortunately, this thing is unreformable. And look, if we go back to the referendum point, the last time we had a referendum on this issue was 1975, and you voted on trade. Now, Andrew, you might have voted. Dennis, you might have voted. I wasn't even a twinkle in my mother's eye. I wasn't born. So what gives the generation above the right to have a say on this issue, but not my generation?
All right. Yes or no, who would win?
I think if faced with isolating ourselves completely, the business community, even some of the offshore-owned press, would say this is insanity. I think in an in-and-out referendum we stayed, but afterwards UKIP wouldn't go away.
Just ask for yes or no.
Okay.
Who would win?
I think we will come out. I think the British people are firmly of that belief at the moment.
Gentlemen, thank you for that.